on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day.
What's good, everyone? Welcome into the Bucks Film Room podcast. My name is Brian Sampson. I'm the host. You can find me on Twitter at Bucks Film Room. Really appreciate you all joining in. We're going to go through some really in-depth stuff today. The goal of this podcast is to help you become a smarter basketball fan and specifically a smarter Milwaukee Bucks fan. There's a lot of things that are going on the court with the Bucks right now, and a lot of things around their defense specifically, which we touched a little bit about Adrian Griffin last week. We're going to dive headfirst into the defense this week. Before we do that, you can find this show on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, and on YouTube. I drop a new episode every single Monday, so make sure to check it out and subscribe. And today I really want to hear from you in the comments of those apps. What are you thinking about the Milwaukee Bucks defense? Where do you stand right now? There's a lot of discourse going on, especially on social media, about what does that look like, or what's going on with the Bucks defense. Should we be worried? Is this just part of the normal challenges, the growing pains, if you will? So please feel free to, I really want to hear from you to get a pulse. And today we're going to dive headfirst into that. It's really been a tumultuous week for the Milwaukee Bucks. They finished 3-1 on the week with 2 wins over the Washington Wizards and then 1 win over the Portland Trailblazers, with their lone loss coming in the middle of the week to the Boston Celtics. Obviously, the Wizards and Trailblazers, very bad teams. Those are games the Bucks should have won. They were down big to the Boston Celtics before coming roaring back in the fourth quarter, but ultimately fell short on that one. So we are going to, I was thinking about touching base on the Boston Celtics game, but I think we're just going to talk more generally about the Bucks defense. So that's really where I want to dive right in. Last week, I talked a bit about Adrian Griffin and his schemes and some of the things that we're seeing. This week, what I did is I dove deep into the Bucks defense. I went back and watched that Friday night in-season tournament game against the Washington Wizards. This is the second time in the week that they played Washington. They won by like 13 last Monday. So this Friday game specifically is what I dialed into to really see what's going on with the Bucks defense. And it was ugly. Let me tell you, I think it's nasty out there. What we're seeing from the Bucks defense is the worst combination. I think there's a couple of different theories when it comes to defenses. Number one, is it just effort? You just got to try hard on defense. You just got to go out there, just work hard, and everything else will take care of itself. The second theory is skill. You have to have the skills. You have to have the lateral quickness. You have to have active hands. You have to have the basketball IQ to understand not only the man that you're guarding, but also that team defense aspect. And so which theory is it? And from my perspective, the answer almost always with this question and with most questions is it lies somewhere in the middle. It's somewhere in between. It's both. You need to be able to work hard on defense. You need to be able to care. It's a mindset. It's a mentality. It's something that you can build. It's not just something you either have or you don't have, but you really got to buy into that. And it's a skill set. You need to have the lateral quickness. Long arms help, active hands help, quick hands, anticipating the offensive player, understanding their moves, understanding where you're supposed to be, whether you're guarding the ball handler or not guarding the ball handler. And when I dove into the film, it was ugly. The Bucks right now, their veterans just don't care. They're not working hard out there, not working hard enough out there. Yeah, there's some possessions where they'll try, they'll go hard at it, but just consistently their effort is lacking. So they have that, and they don't have the players to execute the schemes that Adrian Griffin is asking them. Malik Beasley and Damian Lillard, their on-ball defense is lackluster, to say the least. Let's just leave it at that. I don't want to bury them because I think that they have their moments. Offensively, I think that they bring a lot to the table, but defensively, they just don't have it. So that's really where we're at with the Bucks defense is they're not trying hard enough, and they don't have the skill set to keep guys in front of them, keep ball handlers in front of them. So the 3 major takeaways that I had, like I said, the lack of effort from the veterans specifically. They don't have the talent to keep ball handlers in front of them. And then the third major takeaway I had was they don't understand or execute the scheme. I don't know which one it is. It's hard to tell. Obviously, I'm not in the film room. I don't know what their coverages are. I don't know what the specific breakdowns are, but there are a ton of breakdowns that are happening and communication breakdowns. So I don't know if that is just they don't know what to expect, but or if they don't know what the expectations are on defense, but there's a lot of that. So I really want to dive into those three major takeaways. Again, lack of effort from the veterans. They don't have the talent to keep ball handlers in front of them, and they don't understand and or execute the scheme. Let's start with the lack of veterans. I posted a clip on Twitter that showed the Bucks just getting out hustled by the Wizards. Washington was a much hungrier team in those matchups. There's too many guys that are just standing around watching the ball, all the way from Damian Lillard, Malik Beasley, Giannis, Brooke Lopez. All these veterans are really doing a lot of ball watching where as soon as their man passes the ball, if the ball is on the opposite side of the court and they're a weak side defender, their heads are completely turned. You're always supposed to be able to see man and ball. That's one of the main principles. And you can either do that by getting into position where you're back up and they're both kind of in front of you so you can see a little bit, or you can go back and forth with the head swivel. Those are a couple of different techniques that you can use to do that. Obviously, with the head swivel, you run the risk of having the guy backdoor you or cut and you don't see him right away. And the Bucks aren't doing either of those. They're just really just turning and watching the ball a lot of times, and we see a lot of backdoor cuts, see a lot of offensive rebounds. I can think of Johnny Davis, shout out to the La Crosse Central alum, Wisconsin Badger alum, but at one of the shots he came from the weak side corner because Damian Lillard, who was matched up on him, completely turned his head, didn't get a body on him. Johnny Davis had a putback two right at the rim. So a lot of ball watching. Damian Lillard is probably one of the biggest offenders when it comes to that, but he's not the only one. That's happening across the team, and the veterans just aren't working hard. And really going back and watching it, it's really only Beauchamp and Andre Jackson Jr. who are hustling hard. They're the hungry guys. They're the guys that are out there trying to earn their keep. The other guys seem too comfortable with their role. Like they're not at risk of losing anything. I think back to the preseason and something that Adrian Griffin said that has stuck out with me is there are no turns. Everything is earned. I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that from these guys. It really just seems like it's the veterans' turn. They know that their minutes are guaranteed. Yes, they'll turn it on, as we'll talk about. Because right now, again, these observations are specific to that Wizards game, but it's just a lot of ball watching from them, and it's just those two young guys that are working and hustling. Moving on to the second takeaway about having the talent to defend ball handlers, Damian Lillard and Malik Beasley just aren't good on ball defenders. They're not good help defenders. Malik Beasley has had a lot of times this year where he is engaged on ball, and he doesn't have the skills. There's so many straight line drives. Those are supposed to be the easiest drives to defend. A straight line drive is basically where a guy just gives you a jab step or just goes right around you, goes straight to the rim. There's way too many straight line drives that they give up, and that's particularly worrisome because they count on Malik Beasley to play that defensive stopper role. They ask him to keep guys in front of him. You rarely see players like Drew Holiday or Marcus Smart or these other good defenders just allow their man to drive right past them to the basket. So that's really an issue. Beauchamp and Andre Jackson Jr. are, I'm trying to be careful about how I word this. They are better on ball defenders than Lillard and Beauchamp, but I wouldn't say they're good on ball defenders. I would say they're average to maybe above average, maybe more closer to average. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out. They both have their moments to be sure. Beauchamp, he has great wingspan. He lacks that lateral quickness, so it's hard for him to press up on some of those ball handlers because we've seen guys drive right past him, but he has such long arms that he doesn't necessarily have to be right up on him. He can still use his wingspan to disrupt ball handlers. Andre Jackson Jr., he loves to play defense. He works hard. He has more, I think, a lateral quickness than Beauchamp, but sometimes he gets over aggressive. Sometimes he uses his body too much, and that's where we've seen him pick up some of these quick fouls. So those guys are better on ball defenders than Lillard and Beasley, but I don't know that I would say they're good on ball defenders yet. I would say average to above average. And I'm still trying to figure out a lot of that too. It's hard in these short spurts, but I think that's where they're at this point. And really is just trying to figure out how does that mix up, because if you're taking Beasley off the court or a campaign or Pat Connaughton, for example, and putting one of those other guys in there, you're losing a lot of offense as well. Those guys are still trying to develop their offensive game. And so I think that's what Adrian Griffin's trying to figure out, is that defense for offensive swap. One thing that would be helpful is the scheme that Griffin is running. So he wants to run a scheme similar to what they ran in Toronto when they had all those athletes with those long arms. He wants ball pressure. He wants turnovers. He wants all of that. Milwaukee doesn't have the players who can execute that scheme. I think Griffin needs to pick that up, and he needs to adjust his scheme to his personnel and not ask his personnel to adjust to his scheme. That's really something that he needs to get better at as a coach, is quit asking his players to defend 30 plus feet from the hoop. Bring them back a little bit, give them less space to cover, fewer or less space to defend, and that'll make things a little bit easier. You can still be aggressive on ball handlers. You're just not trying to pressure them 30 feet out. There's a couple of Wizards clips where Bobby Portis was at the logo trying to defend Kyle Kuzma, simple ball screen, and you know what happened. Kuzma got right past him, got into the lane, got some easy buckets. It's just you don't need to ask Bobby Portis to guard 30 feet. Malik Beasley cannot guard 30 feet. The scheme needs to be adjusted to the personnel they have currently. If Andre Jackson Jr. and Beauchamp continue to develop and become those guys, then you can go back to that scheme you want to run. Or if they trade for someone like an Alex Caruso or somebody else like that, then you can do that. But right now, they don't have the players to execute that. That needs to be recognized. Another coaching point is trying to figure out what's going on with all this miscommunication. There are so many times when it should just be a simple switch, or you should fight through the screen, but multiple Bucks players are going then to guard the ball or going to guard somebody without the ball, and they leave a guy cutting wide open down the middle of the lane. There was a time at the end of the Bucks Wizard game on Friday where the Wizards needed a 3 to tie, ran this play. Yeah, fine. It was a good design. Landry Shamet came off a couple of screens, or off a screen, went to the corner. Two Bucks players one had switched off him. So they had two Bucks players guarding one guy, leaving Shamet wide open for a catch and shoot corner three. Fortunately, he missed it, but it's a perfect example of how this team they're doing too much thinking out there. They're trying to communicate, and they're half a beat or a whole beat slow, and that's leaving a lot of guys open. Sure, against the Wizards specifically, Tyus Jones was hitting those floaters. Those are shots that you live with, especially in this Bucks scheme. Floater range, I feel like we're talking about Budenholzer defense, but you can't take away everything at the NBA level. That needs to be recognized. You can live with those floaters. The Wizards hit a couple of tough contested threes. Kuzma hit two really well contested threes toward the beginning of the game. That's fine. It's these open guys, this miscommunication that is really screwing things up. And I don't know, like I said, it's without me being in the locker room, understanding what kind of schemes they're trying to run. I don't know who's at fault. I don't know if the players just aren't executing Adrian Griffin's scheme. I don't know if Griffin is trying to get too complex with these schemes. It's hard for players to learn a bunch of different coverages on the fly. Coverages being like, all right, when Brook Lopez is in the game, every screen involving Brook is a drop. But if Bobby Portis is in there, then you're trapping. But if it's Malik Beasley and Damian Lillard, then you guys are switching. But if it's Beasley and Chris Middleton, then you guys aren't switching. You're fighting over the screen. That can be a lot to go through, because then you have to be thinking every single possession. All right, here's the screen. Who's man? Who's calling it out behind me? What does that mean? Is it Brooks man? Then I can fight over. Am I switching it? So there seems to be a lot of thinking. I don't know if I'm ready to say it's poorly coached at this point, but it's just so much miscommunication, so many missteps on that end. It's hard to figure out what's going on. So those are my three big takeaways. I dove into that Wizards Bucks film from Friday from the in-season tournament game, watched each defensive possession 2 to 3, 4 times. So Washington had 100 shot attempts in that game, I think. So really spent a lot of time trying to break that down, trying to figure out. And those are my takeaways from that game. And I think it applies to a lot of the defensive struggles that we've seen from Milwaukee. I'm not making a prediction about what this means for the future. I'm not saying it's okay for them to be at this spot. It's not okay for them to be at the spot. I'm just showing or sharing what I'm seeing and then showing what I'm seeing as well. So you can check out my Twitter feed. I shared some of those clips. We can downplay it, we can upplay it. It doesn't really matter to me. I'm just more analyzing and saying, this is where the Bucks are at right now. Should we be concerned? Should we not be concerned? I don't know. I'll let each of you make your own individual decisions on that part of it. I'm just sharing, this is what I'm seeing right now. Sticking with defense, I wanted to touch on this Portland Trailblazers game. It was really going poorly for Milwaukee. They were down 26 points at one point, I think, and you could feel social media starting to freak out about it. You could feel everybody getting very heated. This has been a really rocky start. Even the wins have had a bad vibe. And you can tell people are kind of freaking out. There's some back and forth on social media, different things like that. They were playing horribly against Portland, really playing like a team that isn't hungry. I expected this team to be more quote unquote hungry to begin the season. After all, they just got knocked out in the first round. A man lost his job. Mike Budenholzer was fired because of that. Drew Holiday was traded. Lives were upended. I really expected this team to come out with more hunger and more energy. I can't figure out if it's a strength of the Bucks or a weakness where they're just even keel all the time. They're up 20, they're even keel. They're down 20, they're even keel. I think that falls. And Damian Lillard, that's his style. Is he doesn't get too high, he doesn't get too low. Giannis, he'll mean mug and things like that, but he's not really this rah guy. Jay Crowder is a little bit, but he's out. Bobby Portis is, but he hasn't been playing well. So they don't have that energy or that hunger like I was hoping to see. They really look like a team that's just trying to make it through the regular season. But basically, so getting back to Portland, sorry. We could feel, so they're down by 24 points with about 8 minutes into the third quarter, and you could feel their intensity and energy change on defense. They were being active. They were moving their feet. Pat Connaughton, I think, was one of the subs that was entered at this point. He was working his tail off on defense. Sitting at home on the couch, you could just feel the energy and intensity change. And I had tweeted out at this point, too, that something had changed. Like, bookmark this 8-minute mark in the third quarter. Let's see where the rest of the game takes us. And sure enough, so 8 minutes remaining in the third, the Bucks are down by 24 points. So they're down 83-59. They outscored Portland by 30 points the rest of the game, and the Trailblazers only scored 19 points in those final 20 minutes. So Milwaukee outscored them, if my math is correct. What would that be? 49-19 then over the last 20 minutes of the game. So that was really a turning moment, I think, is the Bucks defense. And I guess we'll see here how it comes forward. They have the Miami Heat on Tuesday, which we'll talk about in a little bit about the in-season tournament, but you could really just feel their intensity and energy level turn up, which was great to see. We haven't seen that very often this year. They finally got sick of Portland, who had the 30th best or first worst offensive rating in the entire NBA. They're sick of them dropping 83 points on them shortly after halftime. So that was really good to see. We'll see how that moves forward. I think that's what it's that type of energy and effort level and result that we can see or that we can take and build off of. It's different when you're sleepwalking through an entire game against, like they did against the Washington Wizards, without those streaks. That's really what you want to see is, all right, can they turn it up? 20 minutes, that's an extended period of gameplay. That's what you love to see, love to build off of. It was good to have that flash in the pan, even if it was against Portland. I mean, that's what you expect them to do against Portland. So that doesn't mean we should minimize it. We should chalk that up. We should remember this and see if they can build off of it. It's about stacking successes. That was a good success, and we'll see how that goes from them. Justin Garcia, he had a tweet that said something to the tune of, since November 3rd, which is when the Bucks went to that drop defense with Brook Lopez, they're 10-3 with the 5th best offensive rating and 13th best defensive rating. So overall, that gives them the 7th best net rating. So that defensive rating, what stood out, 13th best, that's probably a good spot for them to be in that 11-15 or 13-15 range. That would be fine for them. They've been hovering in the low to mid 20s to begin the year. So if they can get down to that on the season, obviously it's going to take time, take more performances like these last 20 minutes against the Trailblazers. But if they can get to that, that's probably that sweet spot for them, and probably the most realistic spot. They're not going to be a top 5 defense. They're not going to be even a top 10 defense unless they have major changes to their roster personnel. But 13th with an elite offense, that sounds good to me. And lastly, to wrap up this defensive conversation, just a random thought I had was, what would be, so if the Bucks are up by 1 point against the Miami Heat with a chance to win the East Group B on the line and make it to the in-season or the knockout round of the in-season tournament. They needed one stop. There's 10 seconds left. You're not going to get the ball back after this. Who would they put out there? I preface this with, obviously a lot of it is based off of matchups, but just generally speaking, I mean, we know Giannis is going to be on the floor in those situations. Jay Crowder would probably be on the floor in those situations if he's healthy. Pat Connaughton. A lot of times I think it'll be Brook Lopez. So those are really the four. If we had a Bucks all defensive lineup, Brook Lopez, Giannis, Connaughton, Crowder, maybe Middleton would be out there instead of Connaughton. We're just assuming all health. The main question I have is that point guard. Would they put Beasley out there? I think they might put Beasley out there as well. But would they think about doing Andre Jackson Jr. or even Beauchamp? Would one of them go out there? That's really an interesting. In years past, it's been a lot cleaner of what their defensive stopper unit would look like. This year, Giannis is really the only one in pen. The rest are in pencil. Brook Lopez on some matches, Pat Connaughton on some matches, Jay Crowder on some matchups. Who else? Chris Middleton on some matchups. Beasley. I don't think you want. I know you don't want Damian Lillard in there. You don't want Campaign in there. So I think that's just something that's hard. Of like, if you need a bunch of defensive stops, who do you go to if you're the Bucks? What does that lineup look like? Speaking of Chris Middleton, he went out with a left Achilles tightness, I believe it was, against the Wizards shortly after the second half started on Friday night, and then missed Sunday's game. Adrian Griffin says that he's questionable, or Adrian Griffin said he's day to day. Wouldn't rule him out for the Tuesday night game against the Miami Heat in the in-season tournament. Fans are frustrated with his comeback. He's been very slow to ramp it up. It's been about a year and a half now straight of injuries and battling injuries, and people are starting to get sick of it. Is this a new Chris Middleton where he's only playing 25-ish minutes a night? We did see him ramp up to 29 minutes against Boston, I believe it was last week, before he got injured. So maybe that's a coincidence. I think we need to exercise patience around Middleton. I know we're frustrated. It is only November. If he has to miss significant time here, though, that really is another huge red flag. But let's just see what becomes of this injury. Maybe they're just being cautious with him. I don't know what to say about Middleton. The Bucks need him. They need him on the court. They need him to get back to 90% of what he was in 2021, which I think is doable because he won't be asked to carry the same offensive load. It's a Damian Lillard and Giannis show, and he's the clear third fiddle. So I think that part will be easier for him to do. It's tough right now. You feel for the guy. A year and a half, that's a long time. That takes an emotional toll. He's talked a lot in the media about just wanting to trust the process and listening to the training staff. And I mean, that's all that you really can do. The goal isn't to have him playing 30 minutes in great basketball in November. It's to have him being able to play 35, 40 minutes in April, May, and June. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I think we just have to remember patience. It's only November 26th while I'm recording this. So let's just see what that looks like. We might have to live with the fact that this is his new normal, that he can only play. He's a part-time player. That's a tough pill to swallow, especially with the new contract extension he signed this year. But that might just be his new normal. For now, let's just exercise patience and see what becomes of this injury and then how they continue to ramp him up. I mean, before this, he was trending in the right direction. He was increasing his playing time, so that was good to see. His per 36-minute numbers were looking good. They weren't quite at where they were at his peak, but close enough that it don't matter. So we'll see where it comes at. hope that he has a speedy recovery and can return even as soon as Tuesday against the Heat. So speaking of the Heat, let's talk in-season tournament because we're getting down to the nitty-gritty here, and this is exciting stuff. This is exactly what the NBA wanted to create is intrigue amongst the fans. I will say I was at Friday night's game at the Forum, and it to me it just felt like another game. I don't think that the Bucks were that more amped up. I don't know that the crowd was that much more amped up. Maybe a little bit. I will say maybe a little bit, but not too much. Maybe it's because it was the Wizards and everyone just expected the Bucks to play well and to beat them. At the end of the day, though, the NBA, the ratings are up big time on these games, which is exactly what they're looking for. So the Bucks lead Group B. There are 3 groups in the Eastern Conference. The winner of each of those groups will go on to the knockout round and plus a wild card. So the wild card is the team with the best group play record but didn't win their Bucks lead Group B. They're 3-0 with a 39 plus 39 point differential. The Knicks and the Heat are 2-1. The Hornets are 1-2, and the Wizards are done with group play. They finished winless at 0-4. So here's our scenarios with the final games being played on Tuesday, November 28th. If the Bucks win, they win East Group. They win Group B in the East, and they'll get the top seed overall. So the Pacers, they already locked up Group A at 4-0, but they have the same point differential as the Bucks, plus 39. So even if Milwaukee wins by 1 point, they obviously will finish with a better point differential, therefore locking in the top seed in the East, and by default then playing the wild card team. So that's what's on the line. Bucks win, they get the top seed in the East. If the Bucks lose and the Knicks lose, because remember the Knicks are 2-1, so they're playing the Hornets. So if the Bucks lose and the Knicks lose, Heat win Group B. If the Bucks lose and the Knicks win, it will come down to point differential between the Bucks, the Knicks, and the Heat. So again, Bucks are plus 39, Knicks are plus 18, Heat are plus 11. So in that scenario, it really would take a big whooping by the Bucks or Bucks to get whooped. So let's say Bucks lose by 10 and the Knicks beat the Hornets by 10. The Bucks would then have a plus 29 point differential. Knicks would have a plus 28 point differential. Heat would have a plus 21 point differential. Therefore, ding, 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 the Bucks would win the East Group B. Clear as mud? All right. Well, hold on though. Hold on. We got one more here. So if the Bucks lose, though, the one lost team in the East who didn't win their group and has the highest point differential will get the wild card. So let's say they lose by 11 and the Knicks win by 11. Therefore, the Knicks would win Group B and the Bucks would have a plus 28 point differential. So Milwaukee would have to, of those one loss teams who would be in contention for the wild card, it would be the Bucks, it would be the Magic who are plus 22, it would be the Knicks, the Heat. Obviously, one of the Bucks, Knicks, and Heat will win their division or will win their group. But then the other teams are the Nets, the Cavs, and the Celtics, with one of the Magic, Nets, or Celtics winning their group. So there's a lot to play out here. I'm sure that was confusing as hell. But just basically, the Bucks win, they win Group B. If they lose and the Knicks lose, Heat win Group B. The Bucks lose and the Knicks win. Comes down to point differential between the Bucks, the Knicks, and the Heat of who will win Group B, and then we'll sort it all out from there. I mean, I think just talking that through, I'm thinking there might be a decent chance the Bucks could match up with. So if the Bucks lose and the Heat win, they might see each other again. I don't know. We'll see how that works out. This will be exciting stuff. Damian Lillard talked after the first game of he doesn't know what's going on at this in-season tournament. He just wants to make it to Vegas, and the Bucks will be one game closer to making it to Vegas if they earn this knockout round. Obviously, if they win, they would host that first game against the wild card team. So we'll see how that all plays out. It's exciting stuff. I mean, this is exactly what the NBA was hoping for, I think, by putting the Bucks and the Heat in this last game on Tuesday night, as far as figuring out to see win or go home. Really, there's a lot to play for. This is a budding rivalry between the two teams. They've seen each other in the playoffs the last couple of years, and now they are playing for a championship essentially in Bucks or in Group B. And I just had my phone. I was checking to make sure it's on TNT on Tuesday night. So the NBA is going to win with that matchup. We'll see if the teams can match the intensity level that I expect. I think they already don't like them. Put Giannis on Butler. Don't even mess around with that and just go to work. Build off of this last 20 minutes of Portland. Let's feel good about this Bucks win over the Heat. Let's just dominate them from tip off to buzzer. Let's do it. And on that, we're gonna end that on a high note. That feels like a good spot to end the pod and a podcast at. So thank you for tuning in. You can find me on Bucks Film Room and Twitter, or at Bucks Film Room on Twitter. Again, every Monday we release an episode on YouTube, on Apple Podcasts, and on Spotify. Please, I want to hear from you. Put in the chat, what do you think about this Bucks defense? How worried should we be? And if you want to subscribe, hit that like button. That would be great. All right, I'll catch you next time.